Don't
Before
cry.
the Fellowship is the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan. All right, we'll start again. Fine. That's okay. It's all good. That wasn't my fault, though, to be fair. Cameron, you wanted to say something witty. Go ahead.
Oh, you got loud again.
Mike
You got loud again.
just obliterated my ears.
My mic did?
Yeah,
It just got loud again.
Hold on.
Did
got
it
loud
just
again.
like reset, or do I
Go
need to
into your
press enter?
settings
Okay.
and go in on audio and see if you've selected automatically adjust mic volume.
It's not on there, but I will.
Oh.
I'll drop it down. It's not doing that, but I think it is doing that on my main one. Let's have a look. All right. How much? Give me a percentage to knock it down by.
Now it sounds okay.
It's good now.
No, it's not good. Okay, right now. It might be good now.
What?
Yeah, that's fine.
This might be good. Before the Fellowship.
It got
Before
loud
the
again.
Fellowship.
It got loud again.
Okay. Okay. Before the Fellowship. Before the Fellowship.
We've been trying to fix Dan's mic for about 9 months, and we still haven't
Before
figured it out.
the Fellowship. Is that? Is it?
No, I think that's okay.
Okay, so it's half volume. It's at well.
Wait,
It's
do I get to say sometime in this episode? Do I get to say it's been 84 years?
I think you have to. You have to. You can start with that if you like. Before the Fellowship.
Yes, that is the name of our podcast.
Yeah. Well, I'm still testing. Is it too loud?
Oh, no, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
Was.
Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan. Is it still too loud?
No,
No,
I
it's
think
fine. We
good.
just didn't know which order we were supposed to go. I was
No, I
It's
knew.
there. It's written down.
No, we used to be podcasters.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, good. Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. Am I too loud still? You just cringed.
No, I cringe
My
because of
voice
your
cracked.
inflection. I don't know why you're emphasizing the wrong
Was.
words.
You're emphasizing the word was. I don't know why.
Because they've now heard it.
What?
Because they've now heard it.
Why don't we say before the Fellowship is the greatest story you've heard?
No, it was the greatest story you've never heard.
They've
Past tense. It's past tense.
okay.
Why are we saying before the Fellowship? Shouldn't it be the Silmarillion was the greatest story you've never heard?
Oh, dang it. Yeah. We should
All right,
redo it.
redo. Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard.
Is that your Cameron impression? How he reads?
Thanks for noticing. I mean,
This is a long reading, so we really got to do it.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
It could be here for like 2 hours.
Okay. Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan.
I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time, we continued the Rings of Power and the Third Age. After falling into the abyss in Númenor, Sauron returned to his kingdom in Mordor and made war upon men and elves. Sauron took Minas Ithil. Isildur fled in search of Elendil. Anarion fought back Sauron briefly. The last alliance was formed, and the League of Men and Elves waged war on Sauron. Anarion was slain, but the assault reached the Tower of Barad-dûr, where it was besieged for 7 years. Sauron came forth and killed Gil-galad and Elendil, but Isildur cut the ruling ring from Sauron's hand, and he was vanquished for a time. Elendil refused to destroy the One Ring. As he passed towards Arnor, to make himself king there, he was slain by orcs and the ring was lost. The shards of Narsil were brought to Rivendell, where his youngest son, Valandil, stayed. In the following years, the Dunedain in the north, heirs of Isildur, became divided and weakened. Gondor grew for a time, but the line of Anarion failed. The Nine took Minas Ithil and made it Minas Morgul, Tower of Sorcery. Osgiliath was abandoned, but Minas Anor was held and renamed Minas Tirith, Tower of the Guard. The Rohirrim dwelt in Rohan and aided Gondor in the battle against Mordor. Today, we conclude the Rings of Power and the Third Age, beginning on page 297 of the second edition. In all the days of the Third Age, after the fall of Gil-galad, Master Elrond abode in Imaldris, and he gathered there many elves and other folk of wisdom and power among all the kindreds of Middle-earth. And he preserved, through many lives of men, the memory of all that had been fair. And the house of Elrond was a refuge for the weary and the oppressed, and a treasury of good counsel and wise lore. In that house were harbored the heirs of Isildur, in childhood and old age, because of the kinship of their blood with Elrond himself, and because he knew in his wisdom that one should come of their line to whom a great part was appointed in the last deeds of that age. And until that time came, the shards of Elendil's sword were given into the keeping of Elrond, when the days of the Dunedain darkened, and they became a wandering people. In Eriador, Imaldris was the chief dwelling of the High Elves, but at the grey havens of Lindor there abode also a remnant of the people of Gil-galad, their elven king. At times they would wander into the lands of Eriador, but for the most part they dwelt near the shores of the sea, building and tending the elven ships wherein those of the firstborn who grew weary of the world set sail into the uttermost west. Círdan the shipwright was lord of the havens and mighty among the wise. Of the three rings that the elves had preserved unsullied, no open word was ever spoken among the wise, and few even of the Eldar knew where they were bestowed. Yet after the fall of Sauron, their power was ever at work, and where they abode, there mirth also dwelt, and all things were unstained by the griefs of time. Therefore, ere the Third Age was ended, and the elves perceived that the Ring of Sapphire was with Elrond in the fair valley of Rivendell, upon whose house the stars of heaven most brightly shone, whereas the Ring of Adamant was in the land of Lorien, where dwelt the Lady Galadriel. A queen she was of the woodland elves, the wife of Celeborn of Doriath, yet she herself was of the Noldor, and remembered the day before days in Valinor, and she was the mightiest and fairest of all the elves that remained in Middle-earth. But the Red Ring remained hidden until the end, and none save Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan knew to whom it had been committed. Thus it was that in two domains the bliss and beauty of the elves remained still undiminished while the age endured. In Imaldris and in Lothlorien, the hidden land between Celebrant and Anduin, where the trees bore flowers of gold and no orc or evil thing dared ever come. Yet many voices were heard among the elves, foreboding that if Sauron should come again, then either he would find the ruling ring that was lost, or at the best, his enemies would discover it and destroy it. But in either chance, the powers of the three must then fail, and all things maintained by them must fade, and so the elves should pass into the twilight, and the dominion of men begin. And so indeed it has since befallen. The one and the seven and the nine are destroyed, and the three have passed away, and with them the Third Age is ended. And the tales of the Eldar and Middle-earth draw to their close. Those were the fading years, and in them the last flowering of the elves east of the sea came to its winter. In that time the Noldor walked still in the hitherlands, mightiest and fairest of the children of the world, and their tongues were still heard by mortal ears. Many things of beauty and wonder remained on earth in that time, and many things also of evil and dread. Orcs there were, and trolls and dragons and fell beasts and strange creatures old and wise in the woods, whose names are forgotten. Dwarves still labored in the hills and wrought with patient craftworks of metal and stone that none now can rival. But the dominion of men was preparing, and all things were changing, until at last, the Dark Lord arose in Mirkwood again. Now, of old, the name of that forest was Greenwood the Great, and its wide halls and aisles were the haunt of many beasts and of birds of bright song. And there was the realm of King Thranduil, under the oak and the beech. But after many years, when well nigh a third of that age of the world had passed, a darkness crept slowly through the wood from the southward, and fear walked there in shadowy glades. Fell beasts came hunting, and cruel and evil creatures laid there their snares. Then the name of the forest was changed, and Mirkwood it was called, for the nightshade lay deep there, and few dared pass through, save only in the north, where Thranduil's people still held the evil at bay. Whence it came, few could tell, and it was long ere before the wise could ever discover it. It was the shadow of Sauron, and the sign of his return. For coming out of the wastes of the east, he took up his abode in the south of the forest, and slowly he grew, and took shape there again. In a dark hill he had made his dwelling, and wrought there his sorcery, and all folk feared the sorcerer of Dol Guldur. And yet they knew not at first how great was their peril. Even as the first shadows were felt in Mirkwood, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Astari, whom men called the Wizards. None knew at the time whence they were, save Círdan of the Havens, and only Elrond and to Galadriel did he reveal that they ever came over the sea. But afterwards it was said among elves that they were messengers sent by the lords of the west to contest the power of Sauron if he should ever rise again, and to move elves and men and all living things of good will to valiant deeds. In the likeness of men they appeared, old but rigorous, and they changed little with the years, and aged but slowly, though great cares laid on them. Great wisdom they had, and many powers of mind and hand. Long they journeyed far and wide among the elves and men, and held converse also with beasts and with birds. And the people of Middle-earth gave to them many names, for their true names they did not reveal. Chief among them were those whom the elves called Mithrandir and Curunir, but men in the north named Gandalf and Saruman. Of these, Curunir was the eldest and came first, and after him came Mithrandir and Radagast, and others of the Astari who went into the east of Middle-earth, and do not come into these tales. Radagast was friend of all beasts and birds, but Curunir went most among men, and he was subtle in speech and skilled in all the devices of smithcraft. Mithrandir was closest in council with Elrond and the elves. He wandered far in the north and west and made never in any land any lasting abode, but Curunir journeyed into the east, and when he returned he dwelt at Orthanc in the ring of Isengard, which the Númenorians made in the days of their power. Ever most vigilant was Mithrandir, and he it was that most doubted the darkness of Mirkwood, for though many deemed that it was wrought by the ring wraiths, he feared that it was indeed the first shadow of Sauron returning. And he went to Dol Guldur, and the sorcerer fled from him, and there was a watchful peace for a long while. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased. And in that time was first made the Council of the Wise, that is called the White Council. And therein Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan and other lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir and Curanir. And Curanir, that was Saruman the White, was chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged him for that, for his pride and desire for mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance save those who sent him, and he would abide in no place nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the lore of the Rings of Power and their making and their history. Now the shadow grew ever greater, and the hearts of Elrond and Mithrandir darkened. Therefore, on a time, Mithrandir, at great peril, went again to Dol Guldur and the pits of the sorcerer, and he discovered the truth of his fears, and escaped, and returned to Elrond. He said, "True, at last is our guest. This is not one of the Ulari, as many have long supposed. It is Sauron himself who has taken shape again, and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for the news of the One, and the heirs of Isildur, if they still live on earth." And Elrond answered, "In the hours of Isildur took the ring, and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return." "Yet the One was lost," said Mithrandir. "And while it still lays hid, we can master the enemy, if we gather our strength and tarry not too long." Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds, but Curanir spoke against him and counseled them to wait yet and to watch. "For I believe not," he said, "that the One will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago I deem it was rolled into the sea. And it shall lie until the end, and all this world is broken, and the deeps are removed." Therefore naught was done at that time, though Elrond's heart misgave him, and he said to Mithrandir, "None the less, I forbade the One that yet will be found, and then war will rise again, and that war this age will be ended. Indeed, a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see. Many are the strange chances of the world," said Mithrandir, "and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter." Thus the wise were troubled, but none as yet perceived that Curanir had turned to dark thoughts, and was already traitor in his heart, for he desired that he and no other should find the great ring, so that he might wield it himself and order all the world to his will. Too long had he studied the ways of Sauron in hope to defeat him, and now he envied him as a rival rather than hated his works, and he deemed that the ring, which was Sauron's, would seek for its master as he became manifest once more, but if he were driven out again, then he would lie hid. Therefore he was willing to play with peril, and let Sauron be for a time, hoping by his craft to forestall both his friends and the enemy, when the ring should appear. He set watch upon the Gladden fields, but soon he discovered that the servants of Dol Guldur were searching all the ways of the river in that region. Then he perceived that Sauron also had learned of the manner of Isildur's end, and he grew afraid and withdrew to Isengard and fortified it. and ever he probed deeper into the lore of the rings of power and the art of their forging. But he spoke of none of this to the council, hoping that he might be the first to hear news of the ring. He gathered a great host of spies, and many of these were birds, for Radagast lent him his aid, divining naught of his treachery and deeming that this was but part of the watch upon the enemy. But ever the shadow in Mirkwood grew deeper, and to Dol Guldur evil things repaired out of the dark places of the world. They were united again under one will, and their malice was directed against the elves and the survivors of Númenor. Therefore, at last, the council was again summoned, and the lore of the rings was much debated. But Mithrandir spoke to the council, saying, "It is not needed that the ring should be found, for while it abides on earth and is not unmade, still the power that it holds will live, and Sauron will grow and have hope. The might of the elves and the elf friends is less now than of old. Soon he will be too strong for you, even without the great ring, for he rules the 9, and of the 7 he has recovered 3. We must strike." To this Curanir now assented, desiring that Sauron should be thrust from Dol Guldur, which was nigh to the river, and should have leisure to search there no longer. Therefore, for the last time, he aided the council, and they put forth their strength, and they assailed Dol Guldur and drove Sauron from his hold, and Mirkwood for a brief while he was made wholesome again. But their stroke was too late, for the Dark Lord had foreseen it, and he had long prepared all his movements, and the Ullari, his 9 servants, had gone before him to make ready for his coming. Therefore his flight was but a feint, and he soon returned, and ere the wise could prevent him, he re-entered his kingdom in Mordor, and reared once again the dark towers of Barad-dûr. And in that year the White Council met for the last time, and Curanir withdrew to Isengard, and took counsel with none save himself. Orcs were mustering, and far to the east and south the wild peoples were arming. Then, in the midst of gathering fear and of the rumor of war, the foreboding of Elrond proved true, and the One Ring was indeed found again, by chance more strange than even Mithrandir had seen. It was hidden from Curanir and from Sauron, for it had been taken from Anduin long ere they sought for it, being found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river, ere the kings failed in Gondor. And by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark hiding under the roots of the mountains. There it dwelt, until, even in the year of assault upon Dol Guldur, it was found again by a wayfarer, fleeing into the depths of the earth from the pursuit of orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Perianath, the little people, the halflings, who dwelt in the west of Eriador, and ere that day they had been held of small account by the elves and by men, and neither Sauron nor any of the wise save Mithrandir had in all their councils given thought to them. Now by fortune, his vigilance, Mithrandir learned of the ring ere Sauron had news of it. And yet he was dismayed and in doubt, for too great was the evil power of this thing for any of the wise to wield, unless, like Curanir, he wished himself to become a tyrant and a dark lord in his turn. But neither could it be concealed from Sauron forever, nor could it be unmade by the craft of elves. Therefore, with the help of the Dunedain of the north, Mithrandir set a watch upon the land of the Perianath, and bided his time. But Sauron had many ears, And soon he heard rumor of the One Ring, which above all things he desired, and he sent forth the Nazgul to take it. Then war was kindled, and in battle with Sauron the Third Age ended, even as it had begun. But those who saw the things that were done in that time, deeds of valor and wonder, have elsewhere told the tale of the War of the Ring, and how it ended both in victory unlooked for and in sorrow long foreseen. Here let it be said that in those days the heir of Isildur arose in the north, and he took the shards of the sword of Elendil, and in Imaldris they were reforged, and he went then to war, a great captain of men. He was Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the 39th heir in the right line from Isildur, and yet more like to Elendil than any before him. Battle there was in Rohan, and Curanir, the traitor, was thrown down, and Isengard broken. And before the city of Gondor a great field was fought. And the Lord of Morgul, captain of Sauron, there passed into the darkness. And the heir of Isildur led the host of the west to the black gates of Mordor. In that last battle were Mithrandir, and the sons of Elrond, and the king of Rohan, and lords of Gondor, and the heir of Isildur with the Dunedain of the north. There at last they looked upon death and defeat, and all their valor was in vain, for Sauron was too strong. Yet, in that hour was put to the proof that which Mithrandir had spoken, and help came from the hands of the weak, and when the wise had faltered. For as many songs have since sung, it was the Perianath, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows, that brought them deliverance. For Frodo, the halfling, it is said, at the bidding of Mithrandir, took on himself the burden, and alone with his servant he passed through peril and darkness, and came at last in Sauron's despite even to Mount Doom, and there into fire, where it was wrought, he cast the great ring of power. And so, at last it was unmade, and its evil consumed. Then Sauron failed, and he was utterly vanquished, and banished away like a shadow of malice, and the towers of Barad-dûr crumbled in ruin, and at the rumor of their fall many lands trembled. Thus peace came again, and a new spring opened on earth, and the heir of Isildur was crowned king of Gondor and Arnor, and the might of the Dunedain was lifted up, and their glory renewed. In the courts of the Minas Anor, the white tree flowered again, for a seedling was found by Mithrandir in the snows of Mindolluin, that rose tall and white above the city of Gondor. And while it still grew there, the elder days were not wholly forgotten in the hearts of the kings. Now, all these things were achieved for the most part by the counsel and vigilance of Mithrandir. And in the last few days he was revealed as a lord of great reverence, and clad in white he rode into battle. But not until the time came for him to depart was it known that he had long guarded the red ring of fire. At the first, that ring had been entrusted to Círdan, lord of the Havens, but he had surrendered it to Mithrandir, for he knew whence he came and whither at last he would return. Take now this ring, he said, for thy labors and for thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee and defend thee from weariness. For this is the ring of fire, and herewith, maybe, thou shalt rekindle to the valor of old in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I shall dwell by the grey shores, guarding the havens until the last ship sails. Then I shall await thee. White was that ship, and long was it a building, and long it awaited, the end of which Círdan had spoken. But when all these things were done, and the heir of Isildur had taken up the lordship of men, and the dominion of the West had passed to him, then it was made plain that the power of the three rings also was ended, and to the firstborn the world grew old and grey. In that time the last of the Noldor set sail from the havens and left Middle-earth forever, and latest of all, the keepers of the three rings rode to the sea, and Master Elrond took there the ship that Círdan had made ready. In the twilight of autumn, it sailed out of Mithlond until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it, and the winds of the round sky troubled it no more, and borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world, it passed into the ancient West, and an end was come for the Eldar of story and song. The end. Elrond harbors the heirs of Isildur, waiting for the time that one from his line will play a larger part in the deeds of the age. Círdan is Lord of the Havens. The three rings bring mirth to their place of keeping. The ring of sapphire is with Elrond. The ring of adamant is with Galadriel in the land of Lorien. Only Círdan, Elrond, and Galadriel know the whereabouts of the red ring. It is known among the Eldar that should the one ring be found, it must be destroyed, and so too the power of the three rings would fail, marking the end of the elves' dominion in Middle-earth and ushering in the age of men. Shadows spreads into Greenwood the Great, and it is now known as Mirkwood. Sauron dwells there and begins to amass power once again. The Istari arrive in the west and travel throughout Middle-earth. As darkness grows in Mirkwood, the White Council convenes and the wise discuss the growing threat. Gandalf believes that Sauron has returned and is searching for the One Ring. Saruman has been corrupted and seeks the One Ring for his own use, that he can rival Sauron and rule Middle-earth. The White Council discusses the threat of Sauron and the matter of the ring, and they drive Sauron out of Dol Guldur. Unknown to the Council or Sauron, the One Ring is found by a small fisher folk, and then by one of the little people of Perianath. Gandalf and the Dunedain guard the borders of Perianath, and Sauron sends the Nazgul to take back the ring. Aragorn arises as heir of Isildur and takes up the reforged sword. Saruman is thrown down, and battle takes place in Rohan and Gondor. The great armies of men make a final attack on Mordor as they face their doom. The ring is destroyed by Frodo, and Sauron fails. It is revealed that Gandalf possesses the Ring of Fire. The last remnants of the Eldar in Middle-earth depart into the ancient West. It's finished.
You know, I'm always amazed at how you read, and I've said this before, but there's something about how you read that reveals how humans read, because you just like swap words, change words, add words, remove words.
I'm just an AI. That's all. I just hallucinate things.
I was actually going to say some pronunciations do sound like AI.
Yeah,
but it's so perfect. This is the way you pronounce words.
Yeah.
But I bet our listeners think you're the best reader.
I don't know. I think
they like your voice.
I think it's good that we had a mixture of readers in this.
Yeah,
one of us would have gone insane, and then also other people would be able to connect with different people.
When you read, sometimes I turn down the audio and just read it myself because I think I take in information. I'm not dissing on you guys. I just take in information from reading instead of hearing.
I remember you saying that several episodes ago, and then I thought, you don't even believe in our podcast. You don't even want to listen to it.
It's like a book club.
Yeah.
There's a line in here that we're probably not even going to talk about. So I just need to put it up straight away because it's just great. When they're talking about the ship that Círdan was building, it was like white was that ship and long was it a building. Like ships are build, right? You don't build a ship, they are build. It's like a building is like the perfect way to describe how a ship is created. I don't know why. It just has a seafaring kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
Long was it to building.
Yeah, it's musical. That's probably why it's like a sea shanty.
Yeah, very good.
Lyric.
I wonder what was going through his mind when he was writing this final passage,
I'm done.
It's interesting. I know we're starting from the end, and I don't know where we'll go after this, but how it all ends with sailing back to the west, sailing back to the city, the eternal city. I think that's interesting.
Rome.
Beautiful. Yeah. Across the
Rome,
time.
sweet home. That's what they said.
Scott Hahn, what do you think? One interesting thing is, so it starts off with prophecy of Aragorn. That stuck out to me. We got the sword, Elendil's sword.
Yeah.
It's shards of Elendil's sword. Yeah. So the sword that cut the ring from Sauron.
Yeah.
And was broken. And then one thing that I thought I was going to be smarter than everyone, but then I realized it revealed it later. But at first they didn't know with the 3 rings given to elves.
Yeah.
Where the ring of fire went, the red ring.
Yeah.
And I knew because I play the board games of Lord of the Rings. I was like, I know Gandalf has it. When did he get it? But that was revealed later in the story.
Do you think he got to the end of the book and then he went, oh crap, I didn't talk about those.
No.
Here's why that's not the case is because
tell me.
Because Círdan says that the red ring will help you rekindle hearts.
But you didn't say the word hearts, Dan, when you read that. You just skipped the word hearts.
Oh, you did?
I don't remember skipping that. I thought I said it. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Readers.
I was just reading, so.
Yeah,
but
he had me muted.
Thou shalt rekindle hearts to the valor of old in a world that grows chill.
Yeah.
So that's something I love about Mithrandir or Gandalf is he's always calling people to action and inspiring zeal in them for good. Frodo goes on the journey because of him. King Theoden comes out of his stupor and his, possession because of him. He tries to, fire up Denethor, but Denethor is just eternally chill. I just love how he comes in and eventually like Theoden goes to war because of Gandalf.
What? Wait, doesn't he also? Is it connected when he says to the Balrog that I am the keeper of the secret fire or something?
Oh,
is that a connection there or not?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. I think that's right.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I like that.
Yeah, this line that you just quoted. So I've got my scriptures here, and so this is the Appendix B of Lord of the Rings, and this is part of what motivated me to mention this to you, Dan, way back when, before we ever did this. But in the appendix, it's kind of describing some of these points of the Third Age, and it's basically the same line from Círdan. It says, "Take this ring, for your labors will be heavy, but it will support you in the weariness that you have taken upon yourself. For this is the ring of fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill." And it's so good. I mean, that whole bit, it's because that's exactly who Gandalf is that we see in the stories. Like, and that's kind of the contrast between him and Saruman. Saruman he's high intelligence. It says that he had subtle speech and mastered smithcraft. Yeah. So he had kind of this like dry intellect that sought to know more and was like just totally unbound. Like he just was consuming more knowledge. But Gandalf is the one who comes to know people and, you know, by his words, he instills courage in them, and
which connects him to the littlest, the halflings, right? Because if you're just consuming knowledge, you know that the halflings are kind of worthless. Yeah. Like they're almost, they don't even know who the halflings are because they make such a little dent in their history books. They're just like, who cares what men, this, I don't know, offshoot of little men have become. But Gandalf, because he's a man of his heart and his like zeal, and because he loves, and it seems like he's a friend, you know, he's those sorts of things, that he's the one who can befriend a Frodo and fire him up and encourage him to go on this journey. So that's really cool.
Yeah, there's two lines about him in here that I wanted to highlight. One is kind of the first full paragraph in 303, where it says, "Now by fortune and his vigilance, Mithrandir first learned of the ring ere Sauron had news of it." So, that's really interesting because he kind of knows, like, we're not strong enough to oppose Sauron by our strength. We need some lucky breaks. Like, we need some things just to happen. But it's not just by good fortune, it's also his vigilance. Like, those things in conjunction are what allowed him to like see things and learn things that aided them to victory. And then on 304, it says, in summarizing the whole thing, it says, "Now all these things were achieved for the most part by the counsel and vigilance of Mithrandir." You know, so he had such a large role to play, like an outsized role, right? Frodo obviously had a big role. Aragorn had a big role, but he had this central part in this whole thing. And it was in his humility, I think, where he wasn't lording power like Saruman. He was, and I think that's like such a good model for leadership, right? Where you are encouraging the people that you lead and helping them to utilize their gifts and maximize that, you know, and not just for utility, but for their sake too.
Yeah.
And just a really amazing character.
Yeah, it says Mithrandir refused the office, being the head of the council, the White Council, since he would have no ties and no allegiance save to those who sent him, and he would abide in no place nor be subject to any summons. So yeah, his desire.
Like Martin Luther, right?
Whoa. Whoa.
I was gonna say, but does he wear the papal tiara?
No, because it got sold, unfortunately. Oh, wait, let me correct myself about the secret fire. So the secret fire refers to the flame imperishable, and it's like the divine fire of creation. Yeah. And I do actually remember we did talk about this way back when. And we made
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, only just 2 weeks ago. Can you believe that?
It's been 84 years.
I've forgotten the taste of water and the sound of water. I'm naked in the dark.
So it's not connected to the Ring of Fire, unfortunately. But
so the three rings. This is interesting. That sorry, Dan, did I cut you off?
I was just concluding that it's more than likely that there isn't a connection there, but there could. I think it's still open to interpretation, but it's more than likely.
Fire is fire is fire.
Yeah,
that's fire.
Fire away, Cameron.
You're fired.
Okay.
Fire. So I thought it was interesting that they realized their power and their influence was kind of in some way tied to the rings, because they saw that the 3 rings that were given to elves were going to lead to their diminishment no matter what happens. If Sauron
are we still talking about Lutherans, or are we back on the Silmarillion now?
Luthians.
Okay. Silmarillion. Okay. All right.
Wait, what's that Christian group? This sounds like Baron. It's like the
Bereans.
Bereans and Lutherans.
Wait, there's
actually the Apostles.
Oh, really? I didn't know there was a Christian group called Bereans.
Well, they're the
right.
ones who we can. This is for another time.
So
the rings.
Yeah, they were saying. So at the bottom of 298, I thought this is interesting. So there was 2 outcomes: either Sauron's going to find his ring eventually, or Sauron's enemies would destroy the ring. But either way, their rings would lose their influence and power, and so they would be diminished, and all things maintained by them must fade. That's interesting to me, because these rings that they have, these 3 rings, give them some sort of influence upon people and rule over people. And they foresaw that no matter what outcome happens, Sauron wins or whoever his enemies win by destroying the ring, that their influence would fade. And this might have been the beginning of realizing that they need to go into the West, I wonder. They need to depart Middle Earth.
Well, it's particularly interesting because like the other rings were secretly kind of mixed in with Sauron's craft, yet those 3 rings weren't. And yet still they are bound to the fate of Sauron.
Yeah.
Right. They're still in a sense deceived by him and bound to him in the forging of the ruling ring. And we talked about
those 3 aren't,
but they're bound. But it said, remember, it says that all of them were deceived by Sauron. Like they had like kind of retreated when they saw what was happening, but they still were tied to the fate of the One Ring in some way. It's interesting because what you just shared, Cameron. We read a while back at the beginning of Akalabeth, like when there are many elves who do go back to the West.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there's some who stay and they want to, they have this desire to rule kingdoms and stuff. They decide like Galadriel and Celeborn decide like they want to stay in the Hitherlands and rule. But it seems like from this whole time they're in the evening, of the Eldar. Like they're kind of in decline already, and it's like they're giving way to the men, right? The men are. It's kind of the age of men now at the end,
right?
Did they?
Go ahead.
Did they do that didn't they stay behind to actually help men specifically? Wasn't that like part of the motivation why some of them didn't go on? It was like actually to assist with because Sauron hadn't been completely banished. They didn't feel like they could leave until he was. Am I making that up? Like I thought that was why.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're not experts and we're just
friends.
We're just friends who haven't talked in 9 months or however long it's been.
84 years. I don't know. I think it was more so they wanted to rule. Especially the men. The men too. The men are just, that's where they live. They don't have the West to go to. But one thing I want to add about the ring, or the decline of the elves, that's a really interesting point if you reread Lord of the Rings, because you see that very clearly. Like many of the elves that Frodo encounters, there's kind of like a lingering sadness with them. as they recognize like they're kind of at the end of the line here. And but one point about the three rings too, it's kind of funny. Nobody knew who had them except for some of the, these inner circle of people, except their power was at work. And it says where they abode, their mirth also dwelt. So you could kind of tell like there's something happening here. And maybe you didn't know it was the power of the rings, but wherever they dwelt, there was, rejoicing, there was goodness, a safe haven from some of the evil things in the world. And it's like, it's similar to Sauron in the sense that his power was bound to the One Ring. So when it was destroyed, he would go too. In a certain way, they were bound to the power in the three rings, that was kind of what was supporting their existence still at that point, or their kingdoms in Middle Earth, it seems.
I was interested that Sauron appears in Mirkwood. That's where he tries to, or whatever was called before Mirkwood.
Greenwood.
Greenwood?
Yeah,
Greenwood the Great.
Yeah, Greenwood the Great. Yeah.
Nice. He doesn't go straight to Mordor. He says, he tries to build his abode in that forest or below that forest. I think that's interesting.
Which it kind of gives a little bit maybe of a hint to why there was spiders in Mirkwood and all the kind of beastie things. And
then he made it all beastie for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Radagast is in this story.
And then Dol Guldur as well. Yeah, well, he's just kind of like he's in the story, but he's just sort of kind of like actually how I imagine how they depicted him in the Hobbit movies.
I know. I can't get that out of my head.
Annoying. Just like aloof and just like, are you actually
bird poop on his eyebrow or something?
One of the interesting points in this is the two other wizards, who don't feature in this story at all. They just like go into the East and never again are heard of. And I that made me think, like, if we were in this story, we wouldn't be mentioned at all. We're not like part of the, how many people living in the world even realize that anything happened at all?
Would they have even listened to our podcast?
No, but I mean, like, if you're just living like in where's the prancing pony again? In Bree?
Yeah, Bree, yeah.
You wouldn't have even known that anything you would just like, oh, there's those weird halflings, and then like 6 months later they come back again. You're like, oh, hey there.
They come back just a little bit taller. Like, I thought you were shorter.
Yeah.
That's all they know. What were the names of the other two wizards? I'm trying to find it.
It doesn't even say it in there.
They just said there was two
I think they're otherwise known as the
They went to
Blue
the east, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I would love to talk to Tolkien and be like, tell me about these other wizards.
Well, I think that's part of what
Rings of Power haven't like done it so that like they end up being like female.
All right, I'm just gonna cut you off right there. I'm gonna cut you off right there. This is not gonna go.
Businessman.
This is not gonna go to a good place.
And then do a whole storyline with them, like how they're like rejected.
Yeah.
Have different identities.
For sure.
All right, what I wanted to say about them is this also is a factor in kind of the way that Tolkien sees the task at hand. There's like all these avenues for them for the good to win, like good to achieve victory. And many things go wrong, including like these Istari who are supposed to like be part of the side of good. Right. And Radagast doesn't really factor in much.
Well, he ate Sauron. Birds to Saruman. Yeah. He's like, you can use my birds to look around. Like, use my birds to spy on people. I don't know. I'm not going to ask any more questions. Sure, you can use my birds to spy.
Yeah.
And these other two who went into the East, they just did their own. They're like totally like whiffed on their task. Like they're supposed to do.
Because I mean, do we know that? Like, maybe they were sent to look after the people of the East. Like, it doesn't say they whiffed. It just said they're not a part of the story. That's all it's
I guess everything we know about the East is that they're for the side of Sauron, right?
Yeah, they do end up, mostly.
Look, this is what it says.
Yeah,
I'm just reading the text. Okay, it says, "It was said among the elves that the Istari were messengers sent by the lords of the West to contest the power of Sauron." So, well, maybe they did. I mean, maybe they had their secret mission. Maybe they were double.
Yeah, but it didn't do anything. It didn't do anything.
Well, maybe they tried in the East but failed.
Right.
Like,
well, that's my point. That's my point. Is there were all these avenues and like sources of good to try to fight, and many failed. Like and you could not predict that Frodo and Sam would be the ones to achieve victory.
All the powerful things that could have conquered it failed, but only the weak won.
Yeah,
that is.
I mean, that's like the key theme of Lord of the Rings, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Like, I think you could just meditate on that. Like, it's so beautiful. It seems like there's something about control that Tolkien sees as like a great sin or one of the greatest sins. Because I wrote a note in here, like, was Curanir, so Saruman, was he connected to Aule? There was like some connection to the Valar of Smithcraft, who I think chose Saruman to come or something like that. But Aule, we remember he made the dwarves on his own. Like, he was so excited to meet these elves that he made what he thought they were going to look like. And which is a funny way to picture dwarves. Like, this is what he thought they would look like or be like. And Curanir comes, Saruman, and he's all about controlling. He wants the ring to control and to get power and all of that. And it seems like control is one of the greatest sins, and surrender is one of the greatest virtues. And I love the way the littlest, like what was that line? It's about, it's towards the end. Oh yeah, here it is. Yet in that hour was put to the proof that which Mithrandir had spoken, and help came from the hands of the weak when the wise faltered.
Yeah.
For as many songs have since sung, it was the Perianath, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows, that brought them deliverance.
Yeah.
Just
beautiful.
beautiful.
That's crazy. I mean, I can't help but just, connect it to Tolkien's spiritual life must have really influenced this. His reading of the scriptures, like the story of David had to have influenced this like massively. The fact that a weak, small fighter,
ruddy.
He's handsome and ruddy, and he sings, and is a shepherd, and he takes down a giant. That must have just like impacted Tolkien so hard in his life, like this. And then Christ, of course, his meekness, the meekness of Jesus that conquers all evil.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I think it's more of the colonial England, the British Empire. It's like, look at these little dwellers of the hillsides and meadows that conquered the whole world. It is funny, though. I mean, no, you're right, Dan, but that point is funny. It's just below where you read from, Cameron, where, he makes the point to note that, as many songs have since sung, it was the Perianath, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows.
Yeah.
Just to highlight, like, how simple and idyllic their life is. Yeah. It was them that brought them deliverance. What a powerful thing.
Not the powerful men of Gondor, not the Dunedain per se.
And that's the thing, like, they have this wise council, and they're trying to figure out how it all fits together and like how to achieve victory. Gandalf was like, we just got to strike right now because he's going to get stronger with the ring. Saruman is like, we got to wait. Let's see all our options. And he has his own schemes. But the only one who knew the way through this was Iluvatar, was his theme, right? The third theme, the beautiful theme that was going to make good of everything that no one could have guessed except for him. And even the wisest of Middle Earth, with all their lore and all their wisdom and all their intelligence, they did not foresee. I thought that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how the more that Saruman studies and learns, the eviler he becomes. Like, as he dives into the lore of the ring and studies Sauron, it turns him into a rival of Sauron, which is he sees himself as a rival to Sauron. It's kind of scary to see that, there's that effect of pride.
Yeah, that was a great line that it said in it's 301. It says, now he envied him as a rival rather than hated his works.
Yeah.
And that's that language, I think, is really Catholic. Like, there's
both a disposition of dislike, right? Hatred, but it's where it's directed, right?
Right. It's like a lot of language you see in penitential prayers, like make me hate my sin, or whatever, right? That kind of language, or that we ought to hate our sin. But as sinners, we don't. We like it.
And it's hating an individual instead of the works of the individual. Right.
Yeah, I always I found that part of this story really compelling, of the Third Age and Lord of the Rings. That again, Saruman is one who's supposed to. He's like the leader of the White Council. He's in many ways more powerful than Gandalf is, and it's a real tragedy that not only he's kind of like in some ways, even though he falls to evil, he's not an ally to Sauron by any means.
Right.
So it's like he's splitting the power of good by becoming this third party that's like opposing the good. And you can just reimagine what the story would be like if he was with them to the end,
Yeah. Oh, what would that mean? That's interesting.
We'll never know. Do either of you have any more thoughts on this last section, or any thoughts just having now read the entire thing?
Made me think of, I read an article on Tolkien's sequel, which he had written 13 pages of a story that was a sequel to Lord of the Rings called The New Shadow. And I found it fascinating because he abandoned it because because Sauron was ultimately defeated. And we also know Morgoth was, imprisoned in the void or whatever. There's not a big bad to contend with. And so here's what he said about this story. I just thought was interesting. I have written nothing beyond the first few years of the Fourth Age. Then I, of course, discovered that the King's Peace would contain no tales worth recounting, and his wars would have little interest after the overthrow of Sauron. But this is the interesting part, that almost certainly a restlessness would appear about then, owing to the, it seems, inevitable boredom of men with the good. There would be secret societies practicing dark cults and orc cults among adolescents. And elsewhere he talks about like boys just like dressing up as orcs and like causing mayhem. And then these like kind of satanic religious cults springing up. So there's no like dark lord, right? But there's like darkness in the hearts of men, born out of boredom with the good. I thought that was interesting, that that might have been a sequel to Lord of the Rings at one point.
You know, it's also earlier in the Silmarillion we read that there are no songs or tales of this time because people only write songs when there's conflict. Like it was in a time of peace, you know, and there's like centuries go by with no songs written because there's no reason to. And you know what would have been a part of the New Shadow? Pippin in the Fourth Age would have said, "Somehow Sauron returned."
Exactly. If Kathleen Kennedy was making like the sequel to Lord of the Rings, somehow. It's awesome.
What do you think that like Tolkien and thinks of all of like how he's inspired culture, video games and movies, and I know he was never a fan of it and in his day, but maybe he would be now. What do you think? I mean, same with C.S. Lewis. Like, what do they think? Of course, when Netflix says they're going to release, you know, they're releasing a Narnia TV series, right? And Meryl Streep is going to voice Aslan. So, of course, like with instances like that, which are so egregious and stupid, like you can imagine them rolling and turning in their graves. But then when there's homage paid in culture and it affects, like people have podcasts about it and want to learn from it and try to extract moral living from it, like that must be honoring. Do you think so? Or do you think he still hated it?
Well, I think it would be, if I imagine Tolkien in the theater watching the original trilogy by Peter Jackson, I think it would be equal parts frustrating. It's like, why'd they leave that out? Or why is Gimli burping all the time or whatever it is? But then the other half would be just cathartic, like watching your vision come to life in such a beautiful way. And, you know, just the magic of music and acting and the meaning that the characters bring to the screen. I think it would have been equal parts thrilling and frustrating.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I think I'd read from something from Tolkien recently, a quote from him where he said, you should not try to understand an author by their letters or, you know, read their published works. That's how you know who they are, because that's what they've revealed, you know? And it's kind of funny because it makes me think that, I don't know what he would have, because, you know, this is edited by Christopher Tolkien. And I mean, didn't he just pull scraps and notes and tie things together? And, you know, a lot of his words are in this too. It's not just his father's words. You know, it's not like he just.
I wonder what percentage that would be.
I wonder what Guy Kay thinks.
Yeah, Guy Kay.
Guy Kay, yeah.
That's like season 2 or whatever. Got to get Guy Kay on there.
But, you know, my point with that is who knows how much he would have even appreciated the Silmarillion being compiled or these other works that have come out since then, right? Like he might have been like, why did you do this? This is incomplete. It's not what I wanted.
It'd be like, you know, Stephen King doesn't really like any of the movies that have come out. He likes like, I think 1 or 2 of them, and there's been like 20 that have come out. So that's an interesting dynamic. There's a song in the soundtrack called The End of All Things in The Return of the King. It's when, you know, Sauron's defeated and the tower falls. And I've listened to that a lot because it reminds me of the, you know, one of the very first chapters we read about the third theme and this conflict turning into a part of the music, and then a rousing third theme emerges that's more beautiful than the first. There's a moment in the song, and I don't understand music to know enough to describe it well, but it basically it's in a minor key, and I think it switches into the major key in just a few notes. and it's the moment when the tower is falling, and it's phenomenal. It is so good. So look up The End of All Things and just listen to that and think of that third theme, just like the conflict, that Morgoth was weaving into the music and the drums and all that, the monotony, and then this beautiful third theme emerging when they think all hope is lost. It's such a beautiful moment.
One more time, the name of it?
The End of All Things.
We'll have to identify for you where that is, and then you can spice it in, a little clip of it. I don't have to get a copyright strike, but just 3 seconds.
What do you guys think? We're episode 76.
Yeah.
We were thinking maybe doing 52 and doing them in a year, and then we didn't want to do that as a lot of reading.
Yeah. It's I feel like I've read it 3 times in the span that we've read it once as a podcast, because we read it aloud together. I usually read it in advance, and then I've listened to the episodes when they are released, and I feel like it makes me want to read The Lord of the Rings again, because there's so much that it just like it stands under the story of Lord of the Rings. Like, it's this rich history, and like I said, with the elves in decline and that kind of thing, there's all these elements that help you take even more from the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And I do think that is something Tolkien would appreciate from his son editing this volume, to know that it does enrich your experience of his great work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. My son is a part of a book club, and their next book is The Hobbit, which we're going to read together again. We've read it together a couple of times, and it's just really great seeing how it inspires kids. Like, he's 10 years old, but it's just an enthralling story, and it's one thing for like a grown-up nerd to like it, and another thing to see a kid just love it and be able to experience it on a very pure level. Like, we've kind of dissected it, and we thought, I wonder what this means, and how does it relate to culture, and how does it relate to our own lives? But a kid just enjoys it freely, just for the story, without
what I've been doing the whole time, Dan.
Any of this other stuff.
But I was just talking about this with a coworker today, or a couple coworkers over lunch. We were chatting about how boys, like, any stick is like a sword. Like, you just walk around outside, it's like, oh, that's a sword, or that's a rifle, or whatever, and you just play some kind of battle or fight or something, and it's just like built into us, right, into our nature, like to pick it up and start fighting the evil things. And there's something kind of sad that where our culture really tries to squash that, tries to smother that impulse because that's like the toxic side of masculinity. But I think what Tolkien does and what he captures is how you can wield that for good. Like, take that aggression, take that kind of inbuilt nature of like violence, really, but like use it for good purposes, use that aggression, use that strength for good. And it goes, if it's turned to evil, it's totally destructive. But speaking of your son reading the Hobbit, or about to read it again, it makes me think of like when I was that age, and my friend and I would like, grab some sticks and like reenact fights from Ocarina of Time or something, like whatever, like fantasy, thing, just like play it out. And it's just in us. It's in our blood.
That's right.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for listening, everyone who has joined us. I know that there's probably a few of you who have listened to every single one. Thank you so much. I
don't know why you'd be here and skip to this point if you're part of this podcast.
On YouTube, maybe a thumbnail attracts somebody and they
No,
just
that's
click
true.
on it,
Yeah,
and
you're
they
right.
just say, oh, I'm going to listen to this because I've got nothing to do tonight. If that's you,
Yep.
thanks for being here.
And maybe one day we'll read The Lord of the Rings in this same format, but it won't be anytime soon.
Or in Ohio.
Yeah, I'm moving to Florida. I just want to give parting words to people. We hope to pick this podcast up, in the future someday. We don't have plans to. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, it'd be cool to read Lord of the Rings. It'd be cool to do some.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like we could do like the stories of Baron Luthien or something like that.
We talked about doing a role playing Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
thing.
we have to do that. We have to do that.
Yeah, I would love to find a lore master to lead that.
Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, Lord of the Rings. Look at this. Can we could barely do this. Like, how are we supposed to?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words, but maybe like the Fall of Gondolin or something, or one of these, or Baron or Tour.
Yeah,
Tour.
Yeah.
Tuorin of His Coming to Gondolin is a great one.
One of those stories that's a little bit easier for us to manage the length of it. I don't know. There's so much, and there's. I think what I liked about going through this and what we've heard from people who've emailed us or commented is this was just to tackle this alone was kind of challenging, but to be able to go through it and, just hear some friends read it and talk about it, help them kind of make their way through what they ended up really loving. So I think that might be the case too for some of these other unfinished tales or whatever, where it's like there's so much of the lore in it that it's hard to follow sometimes. Not that we're probably making it more confusing in some ways, but at least palatable. So.
I'm glad we did this, even if there was one listener, like a fourth person here that was listening in. I mean, I just had fun going through it. I learned a lot, and it's not going to be anytime soon when we do another thing, but we hope to in the future. So keep us in your podcast feed. Put us in your pocket. Keep us secret. Keep us safe.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll pop in your feed again in the future.
Let us know as well if you want us to do that as well. If it does interest you, please do let us know. Greg, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, if you're like me, you're probably all inspired and like, I'm going to do a extended edition marathon right now. Lord of the Rings, here we go. 12 hours, let's do it. Have
that on and then put us on your little iPad and just mute the podcast so it's like we're watching it with you. It could be the four of us, whoever that four person is. Anyway. We should probably close up, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, just read the end thing, but you got to change the words so they make sense, I guess. Because we have a script we got to read.
Okay. So I have to change the words so they make sense.
Yeah, so it makes sense because this is the
finale. I see what you see. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3 or 3 rings.
Oh, 3! I get it. Normally it's 5 stars.
You just got the joke. Oh, you wrote the joke.
Oh yeah.
Follow us everywhere before the fellowship. Join the discussion.
I wouldn't recommend that necessarily.
Just leave a comment.
If you're the fourth person and you do social media and you want to build a community
if you want to be in a community, do send us an email.
Build our community
for us.
I don't know what you think, Cameron, but Dan and I are scared to open Discord.
We're scared of you guys.
We failed you guys. We're so sorry.
I feel like we're coming back from the Shire. We've abandoned you guys for so long.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I think in that time I've moved to a different house, had a baby. I'm about to have another one. Not me, obviously, my wife. And Cameron's office is empty, and so much has changed. The Shire has changed. So do email us before the fellowship at gmail.com.
We check
and just
that.
say, yeah, we'd love to hear more from you guys one day, even if it's in 10 years' time. This is it, guys. And it's time for us to go into the West. So thanks for joining along on the greatest story you've never heard. But you've heard it now. The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Across the sea.
Every night in my dreams, I see you.
Ships have come to carry you home into the West.